What's up? Welcome in to another edition of Pod Like a Champion, the blueandgold.com recruiting podcast. It is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020. I'm Patrick Engel with blueandgold.com, joined as always by our recruiting insider, Mike Singer. Big day for Notre Dame today, getting another commit, this one on the defensive side of the ball, now commit number 4 in the secondary. Mike, before we get into that, just a few quick things to lead off here. You can follow us on Twitter at rivals_singer and follow me at Patrick Engel _ENGEL. The best way to support this podcast is to subscribe to blueandgold.com. You can get a free 60-day trial using the promo code Irish60, Irish60. Mike, tell us about Chance Tucker, the cornerback from the Los Angeles area, who committed to Notre Dame today as the 4th member of the defensive back class, and yet another ad for a new secondary coach, a new corners coach, Mike Mickens.
When Notre Dame landed Ryan Barnes a month and a half ago, the conversation with him is very much that he's this 6'2", 180 guy who – is he a corner? Is he a safety? I've even thrown around, could he get really big and play rover? There's a lot of different – he's this super versatile guy. With Chance Tucker, he's a lockdown cornerback. He's 6'1", 170, so 6'1", 170. Could he play safety? Maybe, down the road. Sure. You like corners who could play safety, but you don't really get safeties who could play corner. That's rare. Notre Dame's actually after one of those rare guys in Jaden Slocum from Atlanta. But Tucker is a lockdown cornerback, and that's great to hear. We don't need a bunch of guys if you're Notre Dame who are just the versatile, play a different bunch of spots, because you need a specialist. And Chance Tucker is really freaking good at press technique, man zone. I think my favorite thing about him is his ability to turn his head. That's tough to do. I mean, I remember growing up watching the Miami Dolphins with my uncle, and he would just yell at the TV all the time. He would just yell at the TV all the time. I mean, as a kid, Dolphins were horrible. They're still bad. I mean, I've been a Dolphins fan since post Dan Marino, so bad time to be a Fins fan. But he would always yell at the TV because the Dolphins corners would never turn their head around. And he's like, why don't these coaches teach that? And I'm like, I'm sure they do. It's just hard. It's not like an easy thing to do when you're playing man and you're eyeing your receiver, right? Because when you're playing man, that your eyes are on the guy you're covering. When you're in zone, your eyes are on the quarterback. But Tucker, in both situations, whether he's in zone or man, on his tape, he shows a really good ability to turn his head around, find the ball when it's in the air, and make a play. I love his tape. Rivals has him listed as a 5.6 cornerback, not even nationally ranked as a corner. He's really good. And in my commit impact story that you can find at blueandgold.com, I asked Adam Gorney, our Rivals West Coast analyst, for his take on Tucker, and he admitted that this is a guy I think will move up in the rankings once we see his senior tape. He actually told me that before California canceled fall football. But for Tucker, he is not an early entrant at Notre Dame, so he is planning to play his senior year, which is, for me personally, it's going to be great because I'll get to, go see him play in the spring. That's that never happened before. It's usually just a spring game, but now I get to go out to Los Angeles once or twice to go see Notre Dame's cornerback commit.
Lucky you, stealing my LA trip to the squash with the Pac-12's decision.
That's right. Yeah, you were going to go to a lot
At
of
least
cool
somebody's
places.
going to go.
Yeah, so hopefully you still get some of those trips. But, yeah, all in all, it's a great commitment for Notre Dame, Patrick. It's a well-balanced defensive back class. You got Justin Walters, who's a hard-hitting safety. Barnes, who I mentioned as this guy who could be a boundary corner, safety, really whatever in the secondary. You got Riley, who's a 6'1", 190 corner, so he's a little bit more physical, probably a better athlete than Tucker, but I think Tucker right now is a better cover guy, in my opinion. But I just think they complement each other well. It's a really good class, in my opinion. You just look at these four right here. You got Walters at strong safety, throw Barnes at free safety. I would put Riley in the boundary and Tucker to the field. I mean, that's a really good defensive back class. Like LSU, Ohio State, like their DB classes are probably better right now. I haven't done a deep dive on how these stack up. But if you're Notre Dame, especially looking at how that 2020 class was, when you're, in my opinion, the best recruit in the DB class in the previous cycle was Landon Bartleson, who, of course, is no longer with the team anymore. That ended before it really started. And so it's just kind of night and day. And I liked the last year's DB class. There's some decent players, high upside, but with these four, it's a really nice step up for the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, I want to touch on kind of the ranking area that you had mentioned, and that when Notre Dame offered Chance Tucker on June 2nd, he was not ranked. And of course, no one's really had much of a chance to, see guys this spring because it hasn't been allowed. And he's really only played corner or really been focused on corner in a sense.
He's a
And that is a
receiver,
primary
right?
position, right? For a year. He played it in his junior year last year, still played receiver for his high school team. And what it seems kind of considering how all this has worked out with California moving its football season to December or January or sometime in that window, it's not, in a normal football season, works out well that he's still going to be able to play that season. Just because, all right, when you think of a guy who's newer to a position, the thing that's needs more time and just you're better off with more reps is the technique of it. And when you watch Tucker, you can see the smoothness and the athleticism, and especially for what gives you the encouragement is, like you said, how he can turn his head around and seems to have some already fairly well developed instincts, but I'm sure more kind of technique as far as how to win more jams. He's certainly long enough, listed at 6'1".
Yeah.
He'll get a little stronger, and he's listed at 170 pounds.
Yeah,
But
Pat, I want to interrupt you,
benefits him
man.
in that sense.
You mentioned, so he's played 1 year at corner, and it'll benefit him that he gets to play in the spring. Right before we started recording, someone asked me on the message board at blueandgold.com, again, promo code Irish60, plug that real quick. Someone asked me, generally speaking, do you think it's better to enroll early at Notre Dame or for them? So you enroll early, you get those 15 spring practices, or to have that high school season. Yeah, spring. I would say to enroll early is better. But that's for most positions. Look at Tyler Buckner's case. He is an early enrollee so Tucker's played 1 year at corner. Tyler Buckner has 1 year of quarterback, started for 1 year as quarterback, and that was this past fall. And you look at his competition, small ball in San Diego, competition was weak, and that's why he was going to be playing at Helix Charter in San Diego this year. The best ball really in that area. So that's an interesting one. When I had to answer that question, I was like, man, for Buckner, I don't know. I know Notre Dame still wants him to enroll early. Little nugget there, but man, what's your take on that, man? Because again, he played, was it 14 or 15 games last year because he was hurt his entire sophomore year. And his freshman year, he was, I think he was a receiver and a safety. So, I mean, he's got 1 year of starting games at quarterback under his belt against weak competition, and then he loses his senior year and then enrolls early. Because and some previous videos we've done, Patrick, with talking with Loose Emoji, we brought up, could Tyler Buckner start as a true freshman? That's a real discussion we had because with all the hype and talent that he has, and he's an early enrollee.
And with the void at QB coming
right,
in after
right,
this year.
Yeah, you'll have Brendan Clark and Drew Pine on scholarship. So he would be the third early enrollee in the Brian Kelly area. Drew Pine, I believe, was Malik Zaire was the other one. So it's like, man, it's hard for me to see him. It was going to be hard to see him starting the year at quarterback anyways, but maybe he has like a Tommy Rees situation where he starts for an injured quarterback or quarterback is not getting the job done or something like that. But now, man, I don't know. That's a lot of experience you're missing, in my opinion.
Let me answer your initial question. And I'm going to go with what's in theory beneficial and not necessarily what's going to happen. Like you said, Notre Dame wants him to enroll early, but I don't think there's any question about it. For someone in his spot, you want to play the extra 10, 12, 13, whatever, how many games they end up playing in the spring.
Really?
For a guy who's played, 1 year of football against a
1 year of quarterback.
Great. Right. 1 year of quarterback. Yes.
At high school.
Against a not great competition level. And who I'm sure is, after you've seen at the 11, is not still without things another high school season can benefit him with. And it's not to say that, okay, spring practice would be useless in that sense of, tweaking mechanics and anything like that. But this is getting a little bit into the weeds of hypotheticals here. But let's say you get to the point where you have a spring football season in college. Then you're losing those practices, and it's okay. I'm going to come here and be a fourth-string guy. Let's just assume, for the sake of the conversation,
That's something we've
still there. Yeah, it's interesting, and just because, all right, if you have spring season where all you're doing is practicing with the scout team and whatnot, okay, then I think it's clear that yes, you'd want to have if you're just trying to choose between the two. And again, if he enrolls early, that's what it is, and I'm not going to say, oh, hey, you're stupid for doing that. This isn't my decision. I'm not Tyler. I'm not the coaching staff. But nonetheless, I think in his position, and I would still say the same thing for Chance, is that having another year of high school will help them.
Yeah. I think back to my career as a journalist, and this isn't apples to apples, obviously, but I've been covering recruiting for 7 years. I've literally been doing this since I was like fresh out of high school. And I would say I've learned more in the past, what's it been, 14 or 15 months covering Notre Dame. It's like if you take the past 14 months versus the first 6 years of covering recruiting, I feel like I've learned more in a year compared to 6 years. So I wonder with Buckner, is 15 practices, well, right, because if there's a spring season for college football, then that's different. But let's just say the season ends and next spring is normal where there's 15 spring practices. Let's just say that's the case. It's 15 spring practices against college competition. Will that month and a half be more beneficial to him than a senior season? Like I said, this isn't apples to apples with my work situation with the football situation, but I think it's a valid thing to bring up, and I would love to hear other people's thoughts on that because, I mean, it's like if you're a boxer is training against 12-year-olds and you're a 28-year-old man or something, is that worth it? I'm not saying that that's the comparison here. Tyler's not going to be playing football against 12-year-olds, but if you are actually now throwing against real DBs and like college DBs and the amount you'll be able to learn might outweigh just more reps at the high school level. Because especially in this case, if he's not able to play senior season, like I said, I think you can throw any remote possibility of him starting the season as the team's quarterback. But
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think him enrolling early, having spring practices, I would lean towards that being the better thing for him. This wasn't even planned topic, but it ended up being really good.
And it's either both of them have upsides and reasons to do them.
Listen,
and
we
Tyler
don't
can do
even
which he
we
needs,
don't even know. This is so unprecedented. Like I don't even know which one's better. I had no idea.
Right. I mean, and I just like, all right, just kind of taking both as it is right now. I mean, who knows what this is? No one's had to really make these decisions like this before.
Yeah.
So I mean, and who knows? But just kind of thinking through it as it is, as it stacks up right now. And it's kind of if you're trying to make a decision in that sense of, do I want to play my senior year or enroll early as planned? And just the general decision that any kid would have to make. I don't think there's a clear cut answer across the board for someone,
Yeah.
Buckner, compared to someone who's going to do it at Alabama or someone who's going to do it at Coastal Carolina or whatever. So I think in Buckner's case, you look at it as this: do I go straight from my small school in San Diego, and that, having not played in a year and a half, right into 15 practices against college? Or, all right, do I get, the other extra year of high school experience? Well, I guess it becomes extra, even though in theory it's not, it's a senior year. And then go into college in that sense, having a little bit more on you and, more than one season as a starting QB. And like I said, both of these are fine. Like, there's reasons to do both. And Tyler or anyone in this position should do whatever he thinks is right. I'm not going to tell them, what's right or wrong.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, I think, how you look at it is spring practice, but not having played in over a year, and big jumping from, whatever the equivalent of private school, San Diego County high school football is, to Notre Dame, or just wanting to play, 13 more high school games for, the bunch of reasons you could want to do that. And obviously with Chance, it's a little different, but it's the same thing of, all right, do I want to play another year at cornerback? And well, of course, there's obviously the issue with all of these is, can you make it happen? I'm sure every school, and both high school and college, has different things it needs to see from, getting the credits in order, both on the high school and in college. But nonetheless, with Chance, I can see how there's benefit to, making sure you want to play that senior year, and if nothing else, just, wanting to play a senior year with your teammates.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of look at that. But again, and this is kind of an unprecedented thing where, it's hard to say that we're in any better spot to tell them what's the, obvious right or wrong move than these guys are who are actually making the decisions. But
I think another part of it too is getting to campus and spending 6 months, or however many months it would be compared to as a normal entrant. I mean, you get that student life. I think that sets you up really well for those early enrollees. So that's another angle of it too. It's not just the football; it's the life of being a Notre Dame student athlete. I think enrolling early helps you get a jump on that, but that's it on that. We can move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in kind of, spitballing about this year, you can see what all of these
so many ripple effects
are. Yeah, just different decisions and things you have to consider when making them. But back to Chance for a minute. Ultimately came down to Notre Dame and Washington. And I guess I'll say this as far as, okay, is how excited, whatever, should you be? If, the goal is to, see more, Philip Riley's or top 200 guys, and okay, that's that. And say what you want about Chance's ranking, if he's a project or a late bloomer or diamond in the rough, and whatever. If nothing else, the fact that Jimmy Lake, the Washington head coach, former defensive coordinator, and specifically known for his work with defensive backs and Washington's ability to put them in the NFL with some regularity, if he wants a defensive back, and Chance was down to Notre Dame and Washington, and in fact, Mike, as you've reported, even leaning Washington as recently as a week or so ago. If Jimmy Lake is interested in someone that much, that's a good enough sign. Now, of course, it doesn't mean like, oh yeah, he's not going to see every defensive back he offers as potential All-American, early round draft pick, whatever. But you at least have to be able to, if you can, in his eyes, if you can hack it on the field for him, that's a speaks enough for itself. So if you're looking for the perspective on that, and where does this help Notre Dame as far as trying to catch the Clemsons and Ohio States? I don't know that that's like, okay, here's your obvious, like, 5-star recruit who helps you get up in the recruiting rankings level with those ones. But this is still a player that well-respected coaches, and specifically Jimmy Lake, had a lot of interest in. And that's kind of my takeaway as far as we've seen Notre Dame get a lot of some of these guys outside of the top 250 or 3-star guys, but if nothing else, I think that kind of speaks for something.
I mean, last year Caleb Offord was a 5.73 star, and I mean Ryan Barnes and Chance Tucker both 5.6. So that 5.7 is a high level 3-star, and 5.6 is mid level. And I mean, the Rivals analysts have a tough job to do with ranking these prospects. I mean, it's I wouldn't want to be in charge of that because it's a losing job. Like there's no way you can nail it.
Your social media feed is going to be full of only satisfied people.
Seriously, yeah. I mean, every team thinks, or every fan base thinks that the Rivals rankings are out to get them. Even Clemson and Alabama, Ohio State. It's just, oh, they're going to drop all of our guys. He's dropping in the rankings. He's committed to us. I've covered many schools, and I've seen it at every single fan base. So,
and we'll see where Chance ends up. I know, like Adam Gorney had said, someone who could move up in the rankings, of course, with his season not taking place this fall. Maybe that's a thing that happens later, or the rankings aren't updated after February or whatever.
Great
Either
point.
way,
Rankings usually end after those All-Star games, so now you're gonna have 2021 rankings updated through like next April now because of this. So that's gonna be. I didn't even thought about that. Like I said, there's all these small little ripple effects that you just don't even think about until they come up.
Retroactive top class award that could come in 3 months after signing day in February.
Dude, there you go. There you go.
Do you think people bet on who's going to finish with the top signing class? I mean,
I don't think you can go to Bovada or Vegas to do that, but
even if someone did, it would be something else. If all right, February signing day comes around, one team's on top, final rankings updates shift. That'd be like if in theory someone did that, that'd be just about the worst kind of backdoor cover, even worse than someone covering the spread on a garbage time, fumble 6 or something.
Well, when Notre Dame had 18 signees, I think the class was something like 14 or 15, and then they lose Landon Bartleson and tumbles down to like, I think it ended up at like 23. So maybe it was it was around 15 or 16. And then they didn't sign anyone in February than other schools did. And then when other schools sign people in February and you don't, and you lose a guy, you're going to fall down. So I think Notre Dame finished around 23 in the class rankings last year per Rivals. But again, that's I don't want to spend too much more time on that, but that has a lot to do with Rivals takes into account your top 20 players. So if you have 27 recruits in your class, well, your lowest 7 guys aren't even counted, so that's great. But with Notre Dame, you got a 2-star long snapper accounted in there, and 3 spots that weren't even accounted for because you didn't sign 20 guys. But anyways, different discussion for a different day.
All right, let's move on. Before we talk about who might be next following Chance Tucker to commit to Notre Dame, let me tell you about TradeLast. TradeLast is a Notre Dame Idea Center startup that has pivoted its business model to a not-for-profit initiative to serve the medical responders selflessly sacrificing themselves during the crisis. They're doing so by providing free vacations post-crisis for the first responders so they can recover from the trauma they have experienced and reconnect with their families. Please consider helping this important initiative started by Notre Dame alums and staffed by Notre Dame student volunteers by visiting their website, tradelast.com, and donating time in your second home, spreading the word to others, or supporting their GoFundMe page. Again, that's tradelast.com, TradeLasts.com. Thank you for your support for this deserving Notre Dame initiative. All right, Mike, you have 3 Rivals FutureCast picks that you've put in recently.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get into the idea of who might follow Chance Tucker in committing, certainly get the suspicion that this could be an interesting little couple of weeks here as far as a potential for a commitment run. But let's stay in the 2021 class for a moment. You have a FutureCast in for tight end Mitchell Evans out of Wadsworth, Ohio in the Akron area. He's a 3-star from the 2021 class. Notre Dame is, of course, looking at him as a second tight end to pair with Kane Barong. You put in that FutureCast earlier in July, Mike. Where does Mitchell Evans stand, and where do you kind of handicap Notre Dame in this race?
A couple things before I get to Evans. July is typically a great vacation time for recruiting gurus like me. I just call myself a recruiting guru. Can I edit that out? No, I probably won't. I never call.
Recruiting bum. Here, how about that? That'll equal it out.
Okay.
Resident recruiting bum, Mike Singer. There.
Yes. And I can't. It's not even a COVID thing. I can't take like time off. It's just a Notre Dame recruiting thing. It's July is the new, June from last year, because June was the busiest time, and now it's. Really all spring was busy last year, but July now is usually the dead period where all the coaches are on vacation. But now it's commitment time. But another thing is, if you're watching this on YouTube, please give us a like on this video and subscribe to us. That helps us a ton. So please do that. Like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Everyone, you watch YouTube videos, they're always like, yeah, like and subscribe. So we got to do that because it really helps our channel. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, iTunes, wherever the heck you find your podcast, there is an option to watch the podcast. You get to see our pretty faces, and you can like and subscribe on YouTube. Completely free. Anyways, to Evans, 6'7", 240, number 28 tight end in the country, number 25 player in Ohio. Put my FutureCast pick in July 5th, and several have followed since. There's currently, let's count that, 10 in total, and all are for the Fighting Irish, but I got that one in first. Yeah.
Do you want a trophy?
Yes, I do. So he was on campus last weekend. Of course, we're in a dead period, which every time I say that recruits are on campus, I tell them they can't see the coaches. And we still have people on our message board, Patrick, and I've said every single time, I'm like, dead period due to coronavirus, and we still get questions about it. So I want to make it very clear. So the NCAA enacted a dead period due to COVID-19 back in March, and it's still active. So what a dead period means is you can't have face-to-face contact with coaches. So they can't go to your school. You can't go to their school. No official visits, none of that. So a recruit can still do that, whatever the heck he wants, though. Obviously, again, you can't go see the coaches in face-to-face settings, but he can go to the school and walk around, just like I could go to any school. I could go to walk around a campus, as long as it's not like closed down from any kind of visitors. So Evans did that this past weekend, walked around campus, ran into Blake Fisher. I'm sure that was not. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure that was planned. It was a great idea. If you can't see the coaches face to face, go see another prospective student athlete. Really the unofficial coach recruiter that they have there with Fisher. He had a great time there. He went to Michigan State the next day, and don't think the Spartans are really any threat to the Irish here, but Pitt is a threat. Georgia Tech is a threat. But when you're looking at Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech and Pitt, and you're a tight end recruit, there's, I don't want to sound like some Notre Dame homer, but objectively speaking, academically, tight end wise, it's really not that much of a discussion. So, at least in my opinion, which I feel like that's a pretty objective opinion. But as far as his recruitment goes, and kind of like a decision, if you're Notre Dame, I think those coaches are going to know if he is going to be in their class or not by the end of the month. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. But I got my FutureCast pick in for Evans, and I feel pretty good about it. I'm going to throw this nugget out there. All right, this is a nugget I haven't posted on board yet, so probably just do that pretty soon.
Give the people what they want.
If Evans does not commit to Notre Dame, let's say he picks Pitt, which I think if he doesn't pick Pitt, or if he doesn't pick Notre Dame, I think he's going to go to Pitt. He might even visit Georgia Tech down my way in Atlanta. So again, if he doesn't pick Notre Dame, I don't think Notre Dame's going to take a second tight end in the class. I really don't. I think Mitchell Evans, the last guy, because they were after Bowers and Fedoni. They're not getting either of those two kids. Then they went after Eric Olson. He committed to Colorado. If Evans picks elsewhere, I think they still might take a late swing at Eric Olson, who's committed to Colorado again, and see if they can flip him if visits open up later this year. But otherwise, I think that might be it. So, interesting little nugget there.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, just as far as when you look at where the tight ends in general are stacking up with having taken a couple in 2020 already.
Yeah, and I said for a while, Patrick, Notre Dame, for them to take a second tight end in this class, they wanted a difference maker. And, Evans is a guy that they really like, whether he's a tight end or if he just keeps growing and is a tackle. I mean, he's just a really good athlete.
So your visit, and specifically Evans' visit, kind of tidbits and what you mentioned there got me thinking a little bit. You can really kind of do a decent visit setup even with the dead period where it feels sort of normal. Okay, if the kid provided he gets to campus himself, you can really push the envelope if, all right, get on campus, FaceTime the coaches as you walk around campus, and then have Blake, the unofficial recruiter, kind of meet you there. That's as far as how dead periods visits can work. That's not too bad, especially with
all things considered.
Blake there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've been FaceTiming the kids on campus, but that's kind of pushing the loophole envelope that you could, in theory, do.
Or if you're walking by the Goog and you can I don't know, can you wave at Brian Kelly? If
I don't know, is that a violation? In 2 years, do you think we're going to see a violation that is there was impermissible contact in the coronavirus dead period? Contact was waving.
Well, dude, nothing surprised me with the NCAA.
No, of course not. All right. Anyway, you got a couple of FutureCasts for some 2022 kids who could be among the strong candidates to be Notre Dame's first 2022 commit. Why don't you tell us about both of those?
Yeah, so I put in a pick for Notre Dame to land Jack Nickel back on June 9th. So that was a relatively early one. That was only a month after he got the offer, but had strong indication that he was leaning Notre Dame. He also visited campus. He went to Ohio State, Purdue, Iowa, Notre Dame, Wisconsin. So he's visited 5 schools in the span of a few days with his family, and they love Notre Dame the most. They actually really like Purdue. They really like Iowa. I mean, they liked all the schools, but I was surprised. I mean, because Purdue's a really nice school. I haven't been there before, but they spoke highly of seeing that campus. But yeah, still love Notre Dame's chances. I think this one is maybe taking a little bit longer than some people would anticipate, but whether it's last week, this week, or next week, it's all the same. Still really early commitment, but Jack Nickel, 6'4", 230, does everything pretty darn good as a tight end. Catching the ball, blocking, big body kid. My sources on the Irish side of things speak very highly of this young man. Tight end you, man.
And then you just put in one recently.
Yeah.
For a in-state offensive lineman that would seem to me would be a pretty ideal way to start off an offensive line class.
Look, I catch heat for defending things. Like when people come after certain things, I defend it. But a lot of times people like my maybe unpopular opinions, come out in that sense. But so people think I'm like a homer because I'm like defending people all the time. But I'm not ready to crown Mike Mickens the best recruiter on planet Earth like everyone wants to right now. Like on all of these topics, I'm like, people, let's just take a breath. Like Mike Mickens has done amazing. Not discounting that at all. But can we at least like maybe see how his players do, or see him in another recruiting cycle, or maybe even freaking see if these guys sign, right? Because there's nothing but a verbal agreement that these kids are even coming. So that's my thing. Like, let's take a deep breath. Let's pump the brakes on that. And then everyone is slamming their brakes and wanting to fire Jeff Quinn. And I'm like, come on. Like, let's think about this guy's career as a coach. He's been in the business for 30 years. I would say that's pretty good. He's been a head coach. I don't think things worked out very well at Buffalo, but Brian Kelly trusts him. And I'll tell you what, if you made me like say, Mike, who are the best recruiters on the staff? And we covered Notre Dame for 12 months. No, 14 months, sorry, 15 months. So I'm very limited in my scope. But just based on my history here covering the Irish, short, but I've lived Notre Dame recruiting for the past year. I'd say Quinn is one of the better recruiters on staff from how he connects with the kids. And not only that, because they love his 5 Fs, faith, family, football, fishing, fun. I don't know, probably added one twice or missed one or something, but the kids love him. He probably does the best job, in my opinion, of recruiting underclassmen. It takes a little bit extra effort to stay on underclassmen hard. It would be easy to just say, I'll just wait until September 1 of his junior year, then I'll really start recruiting these kids. Mike Elston, who people think is one of the better – we'll get to Joey Tonona in a second, okay? But Mike Elston, people think he's one of the better recruiters on the staff, and I would agree with that for sure. He didn't even really start recruiting defensive ends. He put out a few early offers in the 2021 class, but he didn't really start grinding on 2021 defensive end recruiting until December of last year. Last fall, I was like, where are the defensive end offers? They offered Keanu Cott, who ended up committing to LSU. But that was like his first defensive end offer in months. And then he didn't offer another one until, I want to say, December. It was when they offered Jason Anye, is of course committed now. So like, if we're going to like take everything into account here, like Elston's one of the better recruiters on staff. He didn't really recruit a lot of defensive ends. Like, he was evaluating guys, but he really went after them after their junior season. And Elston does do a pretty good job of staying on sophomores too. But let's be fair here. I think Quinn, look at these things I've talked about. He recruits the sophomores well. He relates to them well. I know part of recruiting offensive linemen to Notre Dame is that it's probably a little bit easier because you're Notre Dame, like you're the offensive line, or at least in that conversation. But I just do think he does a good job. Is he a great X's and O's coach? I'll leave that up to somebody else to talk about, because I'm not super qualified to talk about that. But just as a recruiter, and I talk to all these recruits and their parents, they love Jeff Quinn. You know what the two words I hear? I guess one word: father-figure, all the time with Jeff Quinn. People question Del Alexander as a recruiter, receivers coach. Father figure. And I think that is a real thing, that when the kids get there, they love it. And that's why you don't see a lot of attrition with Notre Dame. That's why they're taking small classes, and the rankings aren't great. Alabama's going to take 27 kids this year. Attrition, a lot of guys leaving for the pros early, so that's probably part of it. But yeah, I mean, that's a real thing that a lot of people don't consider, is that these are real human beings. They have feelings. They're not just star rankings and coaches who bring in this and coach on the field. Like, this is more than just wins and losses. And I think if you're a Notre Dame fan, you know that. Like, I shouldn't have to like remind people or anything like that. It's a 4 for 40 thing at Notre Dame. It's more than football. I don't know if everyone wants to hear that. I'll step off my soapbox, but
Joey Tonona. Yes. which brings us all to talking about Jeff Quinn, offensive line.
Yeah,
Joey Tonona.
Quinn did a great job in Tonona's recruitment, which obviously he still hasn't announced the commitment, but I do think he'll make it early once the Irish, this kid's recruitment was nuts to me. No offers during his sophomore year of football. He picked up his first one, I think it was November 8th, and his season ended the week before. So, I mean, at that point, it's like, man, I'm just hoping to get my first offer. Fast forward 6 months later, he's got Notre Dame, Ohio State, LSU, Michigan, all these big-time schools. Oh, he's got over a dozen. Like I said, Jeff Quinn does just a good job of weekly calls with these underclassmen recruits, because the kids have to call the coaches until September 1st. That's the case of junior year. So great relationship. Tonona visited for a game last fall when, again, he was really under the radar at that point, but Notre Dame got him on campus. A kid from Indianapolis, you'd love to see Notre Dame racking up that Midwest talent, especially in 2022 where the base is really strong. So, this would be a really good get for Notre Dame if it works out.
Yeah, definitely kind of an interesting, deal from kind of 0 to 100 in the sense of his recruitment. And, I'm not really sure what it was that, only got everybody to offer in the last, 10 months or whatever. I remember how many months
Yeah,
it's been since
January.
the season ended.
Yeah.
So
November.
not even 10 months.
November,
Okay.
but you know what, Patrick? Maybe I'm getting recruits mixed up, but it's been very recent. Yeah.
And certainly the type of kid that you want to see Notre Dame targeting, but also getting each cycle on the offensive line class. It's almost always going to be taken more than one offensive lineman, and to have someone of his status, 4-star recruit, really developed and has just a good frame at 6'5" and 280. At least is what he's listed at as a sophomore, and to see him really push guys around out there, another good start on the offensive line class. Of course, I don't even know how many months it is until December of 2021 when these guys sign. Who knows how time works, but definitely the way you want to start it. We'll, of course, see how they finish it.
You said it there as if it's already happened. So let's.
Right. I mean, just
you never know until a kid
announces.
Until a kid announces. I mean, I've seen stranger things happen. So
yes, and again, just kind of working off of what you had said here is, let's just say for a minute he picks Notre Dame. All of that still kind of applies as far as the type of kid that you want to get, and certainly be.
Did you agree with my rant there? Like, was I off base?
No. And I mean, look, people are gonna look at rankings and look at things, and they matter, and I certainly think that in a way Notre Dame can be recruiting on the offensive line, say, better than it has been in the last however many months, 5 months, whatever. And, getting some of the guys like Nolan Rucci, who seems destined to head elsewhere, Landon Tengwall, who's committed elsewhere. Obviously, Raqqa Spindler would change that if he picks Notre Dame next month. But I think it is worth something, like you said. Like, the recruits and their parents seem to all like a lot of the guys that you mentioned, and that certainly matters because those are the representatives of the school that they're first dealing with. So certainly not the entire package in a sense of what makes a recruiter, but it's pretty much a non-starter if the families and the player and users that you're recruiting aren't all vibing with you or don't really like you or whatever. So even though, yes, that's something that ideally you just want to have out of anybody, that doesn't mean you can't acknowledge that it's still a good thing. But certainly I think some of the at least angst over offensive line treading water and whatever people would say if Raqqa Spindler doesn't commit to Notre Dame, I can see how that's fair, especially considering the big splash that was made over a year ago with Blake Fisher and some of the other big name guys that were really high on Notre Dame early and for whatever different reasons have ended up choosing elsewhere or their recruitments have drifted elsewhere. It's certainly okay to be upset about those because those are the guys that are going to get you up there in the rankings and those will matter and are generally good indicative. It's not to say that all right, everybody else they have committed now is is not going to do anything, but at least you help your chances in your just odds period of churning out all Americans and first
Yeah.
round picks and whatever the higher rated guys you go. But yeah, I certainly think you make a lot of good points about how the families and the recruits see these guys, and
Yeah.
that's worth something.
My biggest thing with criticizing coaches on the recruiting trail is, so when Will Shipley picks Clemson, right? Or let's say Spindler picks Michigan or Ohio State or whatever, it won't be because it was a lack of effort. Like Notre Dame's went hard after those guys. But I feel like if you're going to criticize coaches, it should be because they were outworked. If they were outworked, then you can like it. Then like go after it. If Chance Tucker would have picked Washington, I would have felt it was because they were outworked. Because early after offering him, it was Mickens who talked to Tucker about once a week, and they didn't really put a full court press on because I think maybe they were thinking that Tucker's timeline was a little bit farther than it was because Washington went all on him. And Notre Dame was talking to him a good bit, once or twice a week, but didn't really put that full court press on him until maybe like July 7, 8, around that time frame. But then when they were like, man, we might lose this kid to Washington. And then they kind of, pulled their pants up, went to work, and, then went out and won that recruitment. So in that sense, if they would have lost Tucker, I would have been like, it's because they got outworked, because that kid wanted to go to Notre Dame once they offered. And then Washington really stole the momentum back with how hard they recruited them. So again, for me, I mean, we're all armchair recruiting analysts, or I'm a recruiting bum now, but so it's hard to say without actually like being in those rooms and having the full context and stories from all the different sides to like question how good of a recruiter is. And of course, the proof is in the pudding on this stuff. Like if you're a quarterback's coach for 5 years and the quarterbacks you bring in stink, then like, yeah, we know that you're probably not a good recruiter. But I was going somewhere with that, but I lost my train of thought. Can you help me out?
No, it makes sense in that, like, if you want to be upset that Notre Dame didn't get Will Shipley or doesn't get Raqqa Spindler if he goes elsewhere, that's fine. Like, I get it. But it's a different type of either discussion or
if you
thing.
got outworked.
Right. In this case, in either of those cases, if Spindler heads elsewhere, that's not really going to be the case. And, of course, there's all kinds of different parts of it where if you're bringing in highly ranked QBs, but they're all bad, okay, maybe your eye for talent isn't that great. And that's part of being a good recruiter, or whatever you're doing when you get these guys on campus is different. But
right.
Yes, I think there's not every miss on the trail is for all of the exact same reasons, in a sense.
People
and
like
so
to
I think
put
sometimes you don't know the whole thing.
People like to put recruiting in a box and say it's black and white. It's just not. It's crazy. Man, we're getting along. Let's move on to our quick hitters, Patrick.
Yes. Real quick though, let me tell you about Augie's Locker Room. Looking for that unique Notre Dame item for the Fighting Irish fan in your life? Visit Augie's Locker Room, the country's #1 Notre Dame memorabilia shop. They have the largest selection of Notre Dame helmets, dating all the way back to the turn of the century up to the present day, including the Shamrock Series helmet. They also have stadium benches, frame tickets, one-of-a-kind Rock Me items, signed items, many other unique pieces. If it is ND, they have what you're looking for. Visit them online at augieslockerroom.com or call 574-277-NDND. That's augieslockerroom.com. Few quick notes here before we get out of here. Notre Dame dished out an offer to 2022 wide receiver Darius Clemens from Portland, of course, the hometown of Braden Lenzy, current Irish wide receiver. Mike, early on, what do we got to know about Darius Clemens, where Notre Dame has stands, at least in the
Yeah.
immediacy of offering him.
Yeah, it's an interesting offer, and I wanted to cover in the podcast. I actually interviewed him right before we started recording here. But um, so he's really good friends with Braden's younger brother, Max, who I believe played ball at Montana State or still is. Um, and so, I know Braden congratulated him on getting that offer. Um, Clemens is from East Lansing, and he's got family in Wisconsin, Indiana, and East Lansing. So it's like central to, South Bend's like right in the middle of all of his family, but he relocated out. Or his father started working out in Portland, so they relocated out there. So it's just immediate family out on the West Coast. So it could certainly be a situation maybe where, if Darius goes to Notre Dame, maybe family comes back out to the Midwest. So 6'3", 185, wide receiver, offered rising junior prospects. So he's in the 2022 class. Once Washington and Stanford offered him, I believe Stanford offered him as well. But once I saw Washington offer, I was like, man, Notre Dame needs to get out this kid because he's a stud. And I think Notre Dame's got a good shot here. He was seeing family last November. I believe it was Thanksgiving week, and he stopped by Notre Dame. It was like a random Tuesday, but he got on campus, saw the coaches. So he's met the coach. He's been on campus. I think this could be a kid to watch here, especially with his Midwest ties, and he would be a great get for Notre Dame in the 2022 class. 6'3", 185, big-time pass catcher.
So Notre Dame had another visitor from its current 2021 class on campus Wednesday, July 22nd, if you're listening to this on a later day. Mike, who was it, and what do we got to know here?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So Ryan Barnes has family, I believe it's Winona Lake, which is about an hour south of Notre Dame. And so when he was in 8th grade, he was visiting family, and his dad's a big Notre Dame fan. So him and his family went up to Notre Dame spring games. This was like 2016. Well, who would have thought that the kid would end up, being recruited by Notre Dame, and that was his only time on campus. So who knows? Maybe if he didn't take that trip as an 8th grader, he wouldn't be committed to Notre Dame right now. Maybe like it's kind of crazy to think about, but it was with family in Indiana, seeing them again this week, and spent a few hours at Notre Dame's campus. And he texted me afterwards and said, it was so cool being here as a commit too. And I just really loved it. So Ryan Barnes, guy we talked about earlier, 6'2", 180, cornerback, nickel, safety, whatever, and the defense. He's just a really good football player, plays good ball out there in Maryland too, which I believe their season was canceled as well, which is a bummer there. But Notre Dame's getting a good one in Barnes, and it's pretty neat to see that, he got on campus today and really loved it.
Certainly something that could help in theory if visits come up and are allowed in January or February or whatever, if they move the signing period back and someone else comes in and tries to see what Barnes' interest would be, at least having the experienced campus for the first time, and at least as a recruiter, it's the idea of I'm going here.
Yeah.
Who knows if that's something that just kind of plants itself in his mind if or when someone else comes in late and makes a run.
Right.
Anyway, speaking of the commits, you wrote a story yesterday, Mike, or Tuesday, on Pat Coogan, the Notre Dame offensive line commit from Chicago, mainly focused on his recruiting pitch to Raqqa Spindler. So tell us, what is Pat Coogan's recruiting pitch to Raqqa Spindler?
Quote, and again, the story's on blueandgold.com. We talked about more than just the, who he's recruiting stuff, but here's what he said about Raqqa. The three main things I tell him are elite education, elite football, and elite campus life. Those are the three powerful things. That's my main pitch. Obviously, having a national schedule doesn't hurt. Playing Stanford, USC, Clemson, and Ohio State, all while we're going to be student athletes there, doesn't hurt. He's super close with me, Tyler Buckner, Blake, Gabriel Rubio, and all the guys. It's easier playing football with your friends. So that's Pat Coogan's pitch. When I was interviewing Pat, I was like, man, you and Blake are like Batman and Robin on the recruiting trail, and kind of chuckled at that one. But whether it's offensive linemen or defensive backs or a kicker, like they're recruiting everybody. So that's pretty cool to see. 'Cause a lot of times you just see like a quarterback will commit, like quarterback will usually like recruit offensive guys. And then otherwise, a lot of commits will just recruit guys at their position, but or off on their side of the ball. But Blake and Pat just recruit everybody. It doesn't matter what position they play. It doesn't even matter what class they're in. They'll recruit 2022s as well. So, it's pretty cool to see.
Touched on Darius Clemens, the 2022 offer on offense. Notre Dame has sent out a few 2022 offers on defense too. What should we know from that crop as far as, all right, who do you like? Who might have an early, real chance of coming to Notre Dame? Give us the cliff notes here.
Yeah, I'm just going to touch on one guy, and it's from a town Patrick. Sebastian Cheeks High School in that area. What town are we talking about?
Evanston, stand up.
That's where Patrick's recording this podcast from, correct?
Oh, you bet.
All right. So Sebastian Cheeks from Evanston High School, in Chicagoland. So he was pretty excited to get that offer from the Fighting Irish. He visited last November. I think he really likes Notre Dame. Man, this kid, I don't know if he's a Viper or Rover or inside backer. I don't know what he is, but again, he's just another really good football player. Listed at 6'2", 205. Got offers from Michigan, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Syracuse, Boston College, some other schools. But I think his interest is really genuine. That's one to watch out for in this rising junior class.
I'll just assume that wherever whatever everything you said about him or whatever Notre Dame sees him as or likes him, it's true because he's from Evanston. Anyway, let's get out of here. We've gone off the rails a little bit.
My bad.
No, it's all right, and at least a welcome diversion in a sense, and interesting stuff to try to nitpick at anyway. But best thing you can do if you like this podcast is leave us a review, rate, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and of course subscribe to blueandgold.com. You can do so with a 60-day free trial using the promo code Irish60. For Mike, I'm Patrick. We'll talk to you next time.